Welcome to Silicon Valley Successes. On today's show, we have Andrew Miller. He started his career as an entrepreneur in China in the 1980s. Since then, he has lived in 4 continents for more than 30 years, specializing in professional services, enterprise software, and financial services. He is now the Chief Revenue Officer at Prialto Inc., where he is responsible for overall business development, sales, and global growth for the company. And you're about to learn quite a bit from him about productivity in a moment. Andrew, welcome to Silicon Valley Successes.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Now, your career has spanned over 30 years in Asia and all around the world. How did you get into this line of work? Could you give us a little bit of background of what you've been up to these last 30 years?
Sure. In brief, I was lucky enough to be one of America's first undergraduate exchange students with China. So in the winter of '82, myself and 25 other students went to China. We were on a program there. I took a year off. I stayed in China. I taught English at the National Academy of Sciences. And during that year, one of my students asked me to help source a spectrophotometer from Silicon Valley. And I barely knew how to spell it. Fast forward a few months later, that spectrophotometer arrived in China, and the next thing I knew, I had 10 other individuals lined up with brochures for oscilloscopes and other scientific equipment. And to fast forward, I ended up starting a company, a small trading company in China. I was in China. I had my business partner in the US who was doing the sourcing, the licensing, the systems integration. And it was a classic Silicon Valley story for me in China. The company was called International Technologies and Systems Corporation. Literally, 2 guys on the opposite sides of the planet. He had the dog, I didn't.
And so that's how it started, international business. But yeah. Tell me about your next few segues, because that's not what you're doing now at all.
No, it's not at all. So I had this company that I started while I was still in school. So I went back, I finished my university, I got my MBA, but I was going back and forth between the US and China in the 80s, taking care of my customers. And when I graduated, I went back, I moved to China, I expanded the business there, and eventually my company was bought. And I joined the acquiring company, which was a much larger systems integration company that I was competing against. They got bought by a VC group. I joined the VC group, moved from China to Hong Kong, and that kind of the snowball effect. And my business kept getting larger, and I had more and more opportunity, which then got me into professional services, financial services across Asia Pacific. So I ended up spending the last 25 years based predominantly in Hong Kong and Singapore, and then China back in the 80s.
That sounds like an incredible experience. Could you talk a little bit more about what that was like for your company to go from this kind of, just, I guess, egg and hatch and grow and keep getting bought up by bigger and bigger companies? Yeah. What was that like?
It was a roller coaster. It was kind of a set of opportunities kept presenting themselves, and it was this natural course of events. And for me, it was about continuing to deliver, working with new teams, new management teams, new board members, new investors, but essentially the objectives were always the same. Invest, expand, and engage in some kind of an event post the investment.
So with
And
that,
I ended up actually with the VC group helping a number of U.S. companies develop their business in Asia.
wow. And then currently, Prialto, tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, Prialto is in the business of virtual assistance and support. We are a managed service business. We've been doing this for 10 years, and the model is essentially the same as it was when the company was founded about 10 years ago. And that is managed services, which is really the key differentiator in the business of virtual assistance. Anybody looking for help, for an assistant, there's really a million options. And most of those options are engaging with individuals that are sitting at home or a coffee shop, or if they're lucky enough, on a beach. So Prialto is the opposite model. It's the managed service approach. We are hiring, training, managing, and bringing best practices to the table. So we support entrepreneurs, startups, busy executives, and enterprises.
So if I'm a startup, when would I start thinking about a virtual assistant or playing in this realm of productivity, efficiency?
Typically early on. And really the question for all of our clients, or for any entrepreneur, startup, CEO, busy executive, it's really about what are the repetitive, task-driven things that are taking up my time every day, every week, every month. Reporting, research, calendar management, scheduling. And when you start to think about the repetitive things that we do day in and day out, it becomes easier to think about the opportunity to offload those processes. So whether you're a startup or an enterprise, it's really the same kind of thought process or criteria that you think about. It's where do I want to spend more valuable time, and how do I offload the admin processes that suck up my time?
So it sounds like a virtual assistant can only do basic menial tasks like schedule and calendar, or is there a bigger array of things that it's possible for them to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's the latter. A virtual assistant, certainly in our business and in our model, the assistants are trained and skilled and ready to come to the table to wear three basic hats. One is to take care of all of the business admin processes, like scheduling, calendar management, expense reports, travel management, task management. Another hat, sales support. And there's a lot of use cases within the world of sales support, from research, list building, campaign management, event support, note-taking, relationship management, social media management and support. So that's sales support. And the third hat is operational support. Almost anything that can be put onto a Venn diagram can be offloaded. Repetitive, process-driven, checklists, kind of workflows can be offloaded.
So you said your model is the management model.
Yes.
Where your team, I guess, is managing the virtual assistants or their employees of your company.
Yes.
What happens if one of them leaves? Does the workflow get disrupted right then? How do I know, as a person that's looking for a virtual assistant, that if I go to your company and the person that's handling my account leaves, that things won't get disruptive, or the next person will do a good job?
That's a key part of being a managed service business. Essentially, a Prialto client has support every business day of the year. So the short answer to that question is there are two key relationships that a client has on a daily basis. One is what we call with the primary PA, the productivity assistant. The second relationship is with the engagement manager, who is the consultant and the thought partner to ensure that the service is working and the client is leveraging the service. So if the primary PA is not there one day or is on vacation for a week, there's a backup assistant. And one of the reasons why that backup assistant steps in seamlessly is because every process that the client is being supported on is documented down to the detail. And that's what we call the member manual, but it's the dictionary about the client's processes.
So if it's that detailed, as a founder of a startup, would I have to be worried about maybe intellectual property or trade secrets or anything like that maybe they have? Do I have to be concerned?
No. Part of the managed service business is very strict protocols and procedures around information security, physical security, and IT security. So there's a whole series of protocols and practices, as I say. For example, clean desk policy, no USB, no applications can be accessed from outside the office. And if and when a client leaves, within 24 hours, the entire account is deleted.
Wow. So then, how long does it take to onboard someone if I'm looking to start outsourcing with you? How long does it take to open up my account or get things moving?
From the time of signing the agreement, it's literally 3 to 5 business days that a client is onboarded. And that onboarding call, it's a 1-hour call. The first couple of minutes, quick intros, their Prialto team is on the line, introductions, but then 95% of the call is where we start to do a deep dive into preference setting for that client. And a lot of granular questions are asked, and that's when the member manual starts to get built out with the client's specific processes and preferences.
So in the past, I've actually hired a virtual assistant, not through your company, just through online website, looked at their qualifications, did the phone call, vetted it down. What I found was some of what was said on the website for their qualifications, in reality, it didn't match up. So how do you vet the people that are your employees to make sure that they are in that top percent?
Yes, the recruitment process is rigorous. From getting the applicants in, looking at the documentation, creating a short list, getting people in for interviews. Once they pass a series of milestones and internal interviews, then their educational credentials are being audited and checked. There's background checks, and again, multiple interviews. So once they're actually on board, then they still go through a 1-month boot camp at Prialto before they ever start working with a client. So it's a rigorous and time-consuming process. Most people do not make it through. But we love to hire people with a lot of experience, particularly in the call centers. And our culture, our values, our working environment is it's a very new and special experience for them at a local level. Our 2 centers are in the Philippines and Guatemala, and we're the employer of choice in both of those areas.
This has been some fascinating information. And to find out more, visit us on SiliconValleySuccesses.com. Join our LinkedIn group, our Facebook group, as we continuously give you up-to-date information on what's happening here in Silicon Valley with the amazing startups, with the people that work with them, with all these new services and products that can benefit your life. So once again, visit us at SiliconValleySuccesses.com and keep following us. We got some good stuff for you that's not here in the show. Now let's get back to the show. So Andrew, what are some of the tools or programs that I might use to manage or work with someone overseas?
So you don't have to worry about Prialto's tools because a Prialto assistant would be operating in your environment, in your calendar, in your CRM, in your expense applications. So we are learning your processes within your environment. We have a whole range of internal tools, applications and technologies that allow us to collaborate, to research, to get information, but the Prialto assistant is operating in the client's environment.
So if I were using a CRM, maybe HubSpot or Salesforce or one of these, and I wanted my virtual assistant to an email campaign for me, lead gen, and that, I don't have to actually teach them how to use any of the software. Your company trains them.
Exactly.
Wow, that's great. Is there any software out there that if I were to use, maybe even as far as saying I'm a graphic designer or I do Photoshop or that touch up photos, that I want to outsource some of that? Where's the limits?
That is a great question. In the beginning of a relationship, for the first several months, our modus operandi is to focus on what we would call core processes, processes that we know, where we can bring best practices to the table and many years of experience. And those revolve around the processes that I already mentioned, like calendar and schedule management and expenses and travel and sales support. And once we get a number of initial processes really dialed in for that client, and after 2-3 months, the client starts to feel this is working, and the question starts to get asked, what else can I offload? Like design, like social media support, and other processes that might require a little bit more judgment or nuance, then it's a conversation. So if the client starts to feel comfortable with their assistant and vice versa, the assistant starts to know the business and the priorities and preferences, it becomes much easier to start to offload other processes, perhaps like design.
So with this relationship, at first, how big of a commitment is it for the company hiring or working with your team? What I mean by that is, do they have to hire one person full-time 40 hours a week, or could it be part-time, or how does that onboard someone for a startup? Because that's our focus here, Silicon Valley Successes, that early stage company. How could they, from day one, very early, utilize what you're doing?
The minimum commitment is what we call 1 unit. 1 unit is essentially a third of one assistant. And 1 unit equals approximately 55 hours a month, 2.5, 3 hours a day, for $1,200 a month. And it's 1 unit, and we always start with a 2-month pilot, and thereafter it's a month-to-month agreement. So there's really no friction, no long-term contracts. It's very easy to get started. And the success rate or the drop-off rate between clients that start that 2-month pilot and continue, it's almost negligible.
Really?
Oh, yes. Yes, because, again, it's part of the managed service where we are helping clients to offload processes and to get their assistants up to speed to learn those and to start to deliver productivity and leverage pretty quickly in the first couple of weeks.
So does that time zone affect this process at all? Because, as you mentioned, the Philippines and Guatemala, is that correct?
Yes.
Their time zones may not be aren't the exact same as Silicon Valley here.
Yes.
So how does that affect the working relationship?
No, so we're running almost a 24-hour operation in the Philippines. We are supporting clients across the North American time zone, and now Europe, Asia, and Africa. Sorry, not Asia. Europe, Middle East, and Africa. where we have started to develop our market.
Now,
So our assistants in the Philippines are working U.S. business hours, and of course in Guatemala as well. So no time zone issues.
and what about language barriers? Does that play a part of it at all? Even though I know Philippines, the English, it's very well spoken, but in some areas it's not the first language. How does that happen? Or is it in the screen and vet in process that you select that top 1%?
Absolutely the latter, yes. We're screening for the educational qualifications, the communication skills, and both the hard skills as well as the soft skills. This, a customer-driven approach, a service-driven approach. So yes, but the language skills are being, that would be one of the top criteria to vet for.
And how is the culture, how does that affect the relationship? Because from at least my experience living in Asia, I do know that cultural differences can really impact relationships more than even language. How have you found that with the people in these countries, the Philippines and Guatemala, with U.S. Bosses, more or less?
That's we're not only screening for our assistants with the hiring, the training, the management, and the mentoring, but in a way we're also doing that with our client base. We do not take on any client. So it is important to do kind of the scoping up front to make sure that both sides will be effective. And that involves communications. It involves the ability for someone to communicate clearly in terms of the client. What do they want? How? When? What structure? What format? How frequent? What's the cadence? So to the extent that a client can communicate effectively, that begins to make for a very good match.
And then this question might be a little out there. If you want to change it, it's okay, but I just got to ask, what's the tax ramifications of working with the virtual assistant? Are you paying your company so it's just seen as a regular 1099 or W-2, or how does that work for tax implications if I'm a startup here in Silicon Valley and I want to work with you?
No, there's no tax implications. A startup in Silicon Valley would be hiring a company. It's just like hiring any other company, whether it's the company that provides the internet connection or the maintenance services. And so to the extent that the company wants to write off those business expenses, it's a W-9 form that gets filled out. But no, the startup here would have zero tax implications. It's not like they're hiring an individual. So they're hiring the company and a business service.
And then other kind of models out there, such as Upwork or Fiverr, do you see them as competition, or do you see them as just so different that they're different almost league altogether? What's your opinion of those other kind of substitutes or alternatives out there?
Yes, no, we don't compete with them at all. They have their place in the market. And in terms of the model, Prialto runs the managed service approach, whereas these other companies are running what's called a marketplace or a network model. And so they're the hub of a million potential assistants and experts in any particular field, whether it's graphic design or marketing or copywriting. But they're bringing an individual to the table, and you as the startup, you as the client, you're actually working with the individual as opposed to a company. So that's the key difference. And I've worked with a number of those companies for ad hoc projects, and they're very good.
I like how you mentioned copywriting, because we're actually going to segue into that for next week's episode. The season finale of Silicon Valley Successes Season 1, Episode 40, we will be talking about copywriting, so watch us next week on that. But Andrew, there's still some time, and I have to ask you, what other advice do you have for someone thinking, maybe I should try this, increase my productivity, maybe I should look for that overseas person to help? What other information should they know?
Sure. So it's not about looking for an overseas person. It's all about productivity and leverage. To the extent that anyone is looking to spend less time during their days and weeks doing administrative work, the repetitive, task-driven, process-driven work that they have to do. A sales professional, they have to research, they have to input data into their CRM, they have to take notes, they've got to make sure that those notes get input into the CRM, they have to have calendar and alert reminders to follow up with prospects. There's so many things to do that revolve around the top of the funnel. So to the extent that you can have someone virtually next to you, somebody that you can call, Slack, video, and be able to bring them into your environment to learn your process, your CRM, how you want leads and opportunities and contacts created into your CRM. Somebody that you can actually call and you're driving and you want to take a call note, but you can't because you're driving. You ask your assistant, can you dial in, take a call note, make sure that call note gets updated, that gets uploaded into the CRM, help me follow up with action items. So all of these kinds of business admin, sales admin processes, that's where you start to think about, for a very, very reasonable cost, having somebody virtually next to you to take on all of this work so that you can then spend more time selling with prospects and with your customers.
And Andrew, briefly, who is your ideal customer? How can they get a hold of you and learn more about you?
Our ideal customer is a startup, a busy executive, or a company, a business with, could be 1,000 people distributed across the country. And the ideal customer there is the person who wants to be more productive. They don't need somebody in the office. They don't need somebody full-time. And they want a managed service approach.
Best way to get a hold of you?
Prialto.com.
All right. Andrew, thank you for your time today on Silicon Valley Successes. And we look forward to seeing you guys next week when we have Tommy Beal and John Farley here talking about copywriting on the finale of Season 1, Silicon Valley Successes. Thank you.
Thank you from all of us at Silicon Valley Successes. We hope you found the information presented today useful in your path to success. For further information on accessing the resources in Silicon Valley, you may visit us on the web at siliconvalleysuccesses.com, on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you. And remember, we want to help you in your journey to become the next success.